Before they took me into surgery, my wife sent one last message. "I won't be here when you wake up." I laughed and made one promise to the stranger beside me. She shook my hand. Seconds later, the doctor walked back into the room, looked at her. Then his expression suddenly changed. I read that message twice before the nurse came to wheel me into pre-op. "I won't be here when you wake up." 6 words, no explanation, sent from the wife I'd been married to for 6 years, 40 minutes before a surgeon was scheduled to open my chest and repair a valve that had been quietly failing since I was a teenager. I remember laughing, actually laughing, the kind of short, disbelieving sound you make when your body doesn't know whether to be devastated or numb. The woman in the bed beside me, a stranger I'd exchanged maybe a dozen words with, turned and asked if I was okay. I wasn't. But I made her a promise anyway, something small and half-serious, and she reached over and shook my hand like we were sealing something far more important than either of us understood in that moment. Seconds later, the door opened. Dr. Priya Chandran walked back into the pre-op bay, glanced at the woman sitting beside my bed, and her entire expression changed. Not concern for me, not urgency about the surgery. Something else entirely. Something that made her stop walking altogether. I didn't know it yet, lying there with an IV in my arm and my wife's text still glowing on the screen beside me. But the next 6 hours were going to answer 2 questions I hadn't even known to ask: why my wife really sent that message, and who exactly the stranger beside me actually was. Introduction. My name is Julian Ashford. I'm 36 years old. I manage logistics for a mid-sized shipping company outside Chicago, and up until that morning in April, I thought the biggest fight of my life was going to be a surgery I'd been dreading for over a year. I had no idea how wrong I was about which fight actually mattered most. I was born with a mild valve defect that doctors had monitored my entire childhood, one of those conditions you're told will probably need attention eventually, so many times that you stop actually believing eventually will ever arrive. It arrived that spring when a routine checkup turned into an urgent one, and an urgent one turned into a surgeon named Dr. Priya Chandran sitting across from me, explaining calmly and clearly that waiting any longer wasn't really an option anymore. I married Camille almost 6 years ago. She worked as a high school art teacher, the kind of person who noticed small, specific things about people that most of us walked past without seeing at all. She noticed I bit the inside of my cheek when I was anxious. She noticed I always parked one space further than necessary so I wouldn't have to squeeze between other cars. For most of our marriage, being noticed like that felt like the safest thing in the world. Somewhere over the last year and a half, though, something between us had gone quiet in a way neither of us seemed able to name out loud. I'd taken on more responsibility at work after a round of layoffs, coming home later, distracted, carrying stress I didn't know how to put down at the door. Camille had pulled back too in her own way, filling the space between us with longer hours grading papers, with a kind of careful politeness that felt, at times, more like distance than partnership. We hadn't fought, exactly. We'd just slowly stopped reaching for each other the way we used to, and neither of us had said anything about it directly, the way you don't mention a crack in the ceiling until the day it finally opens up above you. I told myself the surgery would be the wake-up call we needed. I told myself once this was behind us, we'd find our way back to each other. I had no idea that morning would end up rearranging far more of my life than just my heart. The build-up. The weeks leading up to the surgery were strange in a way I didn't fully understand until much later. Camille grew quieter, not colder exactly, but distant in a way that felt different from our usual distance. More deliberate, like she was bracing for something she hadn't told me about yet. She started taking phone calls in the other room, calls she'd end abruptly whenever I walked in. When I asked who she'd been talking to, she'd say, "Just my sister," or "work stuff, nothing important," in a tone that didn't quite match the weight I could see sitting behind her eyes. 10 days before the surgery, I found a folded appointment card in her coat pocket while looking for my car keys, an oncology clinic downtown, a date circled in pen, no name written beside it to indicate whether the appointment was for her or someone else. When I asked her about it that night, she went very still. "It's nothing you need to worry about right now, Julian. You have enough on your plate." I wanted badly to believe that answer. That's the strange mercy love offers you in moments like that. It lets you accept an incomplete explanation simply because you don't have room left to carry anything more. The night before my surgery, Camille barely spoke over dinner. She kept glancing at me like she was trying to memorize something, her fork moving food around her plate without actually eating much of it. I asked if she was nervous about tomorrow. She said quietly, "There's just a lot going on that I haven't figured out how to tell you yet." I assumed, in the exhausted, anxious fog of pre-surgery nerves, that she meant something about us, that whatever quiet distance had grown between us over the last year and a half was finally cracking open into something she couldn't hold back any longer. I didn't push her that night. I told myself we'd talk properly once the surgery was behind me, once I had the energy to actually hear whatever she needed to say. I was wrong about what she needed to say. I just didn't find that out until much later. The morning of the surgery, Camille drove me to the hospital in near silence, her hand resting on mine at every red light, her jaw tight in a way that told me something was working itself loose behind her composure. She stayed with me through registration, through the initial vitals check, through the long, sterile wait in the pre-op bay while nurses moved efficiently around us, prepping lines and checking monitors. Then, 40 minutes before they were scheduled to take me back, she stepped out to take a quick call and never came back into the room in person. Instead, my phone buzzed on the thin hospital blanket covering my legs. I won't be here when you wake up. No explanation attached. No follow-up message. I stared at those 6 words until they blurred slightly, my mind spinning through every possible meaning, landing inevitably on the worst one. That after 18 months of quiet distance, my wife had chosen the morning of my heart surgery to finally, silently, walk away from our marriage. I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was the kind of laugh that escapes you when your body needs to release pressure and doesn't have any better option available. "You okay?" a voice asked from the bed beside mine. The twist. I turned to find an older woman watching me with quiet, careful attention. Her silver hair pulled back neatly, an IV taped into the back of her own hand. A hospital bracelet matched mine, though her chart, clipped to the end of her bed, was for a different procedure entirely. "Not really," I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. "My wife just told me she won't be here when I wake up from surgery. I think she's leaving me. Today. Of all days." The woman's expression softened, not with pity exactly, but with something steadier. "I'm Eleanor," she said. "Eleanor Braddock. I'm here for a procedure of my own. Nothing as serious as yours, but serious enough that I understand a little of what today feels like." We talked for the next 20 minutes while nurses moved around us, the ordinary rhythm of a busy pre-op floor continuing indifferent to whatever was quietly falling apart inside me. Eleanor told me she'd been a widow for 6 years, that she'd raised 2 children mostly on her own, that she still occasionally caught herself reaching for her husband's side of the bed out of habit. I told her about Camille, about the folded appointment card, about 18 months of quiet distance neither of us had known how to name. "For what it's worth," Eleanor said gently, "people don't usually leave in 6-word text messages. Whatever's happening, I don't think it's as simple as you're assuming right now." Somewhere in that conversation, half out of nerves and half out of a genuine need to promise someone something solid while my own life felt like it was slipping sideways, I told Eleanor, "If I wake up from this and you're still here, I'll come find you before I leave this hospital. I'll make sure you're okay too." She smiled, reached over, and shook my hand like we were closing a deal instead of 2 strangers making a small, half-serious promise in a pre-op bay. "Deal," she said. That's when the door opened and Dr. Chandran walked back in, glancing down at her tablet before looking up toward my bed. Her eyes moved past me and landed on Eleanor, and I watched her entire expression shift, not the calm professional focus she'd greeted me with earlier, but something sharper, more startled. "Eleanor?" Dr. Chandran said slowly. "Eleanor Braddock?" Eleanor turned, equally surprised. "Priya? I didn't realize you were operating today. It's been years." Dr. Chandran looked between the two of us, something clearly working itself out behind her eyes. "Do you two know each other?" "We just met," I said, "about 20 minutes ago." Dr. Chandran was quiet for a moment, studying Eleanor's chart, then mine, then Eleanor again, in a way that made the air in the room feel suddenly heavier. "Mr. Ashford," she finally said, choosing her words with visible care, "when we ran your pre-surgical blood work and family history intake last week, there was a note flagged about your biological background. You mentioned during intake that you were adopted as an infant, correct?" "Yes," I said slowly, not understanding yet where this was going. "I've never looked into it, never really felt the need to." Dr. Chandran looked at Eleanor again, and something passed between the two of them that I couldn't fully read. "Eleanor," she said quietly, "you gave a child up for adoption in this same county 36 years ago. You mentioned it to me once, years back, when we worked together on the hospital board." The room went very still. Eleanor's hand, still resting near mine from our handshake, tightened slightly. "Priya," Eleanor said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you saying?" Dr. Chandran turned her tablet slightly, showing a data point neither Eleanor nor I could fully interpret at a glance, something involving a rare marker in my blood work that had been flagged during pre-surgical screening. "I'm saying the birth records tied to Mr. Ashford's adoption file and the ones tied to your file from 36 years ago share enough identifying detail that I think we need to ask both of you a few more questions before he goes into that operating room." I sat there, my chest already wired for a surgery meant to fix a valve I'd been born with, staring at a woman I'd known for less than half an hour, trying to comprehend the possibility that she might be the mother who gave me up before I was ever old enough to remember her face. The climax. There wasn't time that morning for a full reunion. Not with a surgical team waiting, not with monitors beeping steadily beside me, not with the reality that whatever this connection turned out to be, my heart still needed fixing in the next hour regardless. Dr. Chandran promised both of us that the hospital's records department would confirm everything properly once I was out of recovery, that this wasn't something either of us needed to solve in the next 20 minutes. But before they wheeled me back, Eleanor leaned closer, her eyes bright with something between disbelief and a feeling I don't think either of us had language for yet. "If this is true," she said quietly, "I need you to know I didn't give you up because I didn't want you. I was 17. I didn't have a choice that felt like a choice at all." "I believe you," I said, and found, somewhat to my own surprise, that I meant it completely. They took me back for surgery not long after that, Eleanor's hand releasing mine only as the nurses guided my bed through the double doors, her promise to be there when I woke up echoing the very words my wife had used to tell me she wouldn't. I woke up 4 hours later, groggy, my chest aching in a dull, distant way, to find Camille sitting beside my bed after all, her eyes red-rimmed, her hand already wrapped around mine before I'd even fully opened my eyes. "You're here," I said, my voice thick with anesthesia and confusion. "Your message said—" "I know what it said," she said quickly, tears slipping down her face. "Julian, I'm so sorry. I meant I wasn't going to be in the room physically when you woke up. Not that I was leaving you. I had an appointment I couldn't reschedule. My own biopsy results. I've been putting off telling you because your surgery was already so much, and I didn't want to add my own fear on top of yours. The doctor called right as they were prepping you. I had to take it. I didn't explain myself properly, and I have regretted it every single second since." "Biopsy," I repeated slowly, my chest tightening around something that had nothing to do with the surgery. "Benign," she said quickly, squeezing my hand. "It came back benign, Julian. I found out 20 minutes into your surgery, sitting in a hallway 3 floors down, completely alone, terrified I'd let you go under thinking I was walking out on you. I understood then exactly what those 6 words had actually meant, and how completely I'd misread them in the panic of the moment. Not an ending. A woman trying, clumsily and under enormous pressure, to be honest about something too big to explain in a single text, and failing to find the right words in time. Eleanor came to find me 2 days later, once I'd been moved out of the ICU and into a regular recovery room. The hospital's records department had confirmed what Dr. Chandran suspected that morning. Eleanor Braddock was, in fact, my biological mother, a fact neither of us had any reason to expect walking into that pre-op bay as strangers. "I kept my promise," she said, standing in my doorway, a small, uncertain smile on her face. "I told you I'd be here when you woke up." "You did," I said. "I think you kept it in more ways than either of us realized that morning." The conclusion. It's been 3 weeks now since that surgery, since a single misunderstood text message and a chance conversation with a stranger unraveled into 2 of the biggest revelations of my adult life. Camille and I have started actually talking, really talking, in a way we hadn't managed in over a year and a half. Her biopsy scare and the fear of nearly losing each other without ever having said the things we'd both been avoiding cracked something open between us that our quiet distance never could have on its own. We're not fixed overnight. 6 words and 1 misunderstanding don't undo 18 months of drifting apart. But we're finally reaching for each other again instead of quietly working around the space we'd let grow. Eleanor and I have had dinner 3 times since I left the hospital. She's told me about the 2 children she raised, my half-siblings, who don't know about me yet, though she says she wants them to when the time feels right. I've told her about the family who raised me, the parents who loved me without hesitation despite not sharing a drop of my blood. There's no clean, tidy word yet for what Eleanor and I are to each other. Some relationships don't arrive with a template. You just have to build one together, carefully, the way you'd build trust with anyone new. Except this time, there's a stranger biological thread running underneath it that neither of us saw coming. I keep thinking about that morning, lying in a pre-op bay, certain I understood exactly what was happening to my life, when really I understood almost nothing at all. I was certain my wife was leaving me. She wasn't. I assumed a stranger's kindness was simply that, a small mercy between two frightened people passing through the same difficult morning. It turned out to be the beginning of something that had been missing from my life since before I could remember losing it. If there's one thing I've taken from all of this, it's that the story we build in our heads during a crisis is almost never the whole story. Fear fills in gaps with the worst possible explanation, because fear doesn't wait for details. It reacts to 6 words on a screen and assumes the ending before anyone's actually written it. Camille wasn't leaving. Eleanor wasn't just a stranger, and I very nearly went into that operating room believing 2 things that weren't even remotely true. So here's the question I still find myself sitting with weeks later. If you received a message like that 40 minutes before major surgery with no time left to ask what it actually meant, would you have assumed the worst the way I did? Or would you have found a way to hold on to hope until you had the whole story? Let me know honestly what you would have done in the comments below. I read every single one,